As I sat in the van's front seat, it felt like my world was crumbling around me. My mind was in complete chaos. The little warning signals that had been going off in my head all week turned out to be right, but I had brushed them aside. Something had been wrong since last Tuesday evening when Isabella mentioned she had seen a doctor about a yeast infection. The doctor prescribed some medication and told her to avoid intimacy for at least a week. The way she told me this didn't sit right. Isabella hadn't had a yeast infection in years, and she knew how to prevent them. More warning signs started flashing in my mind. I shook my head and stayed quiet. Earlier in the week, probably on Tuesday, the day she spent with him, she seemed completely different and distant during dinner. More alarm bells rang in my head. After dinner, she went to the bedroom to lie down. I watched TV for a couple of hours before heading to bed. When I entered the bedroom, Isabella wasn't asleep, but there was a coldness between us. As I got into bed, she turned off the lights and didn't respond when I said goodnight, lover. Throughout the week, her aloof and distant behavior left me confused. I tried several times to talk to her, trying to understand what was bothering her, but she dodged my questions and didn't give direct answers. I assumed it was the yeast infection affecting her because she was in the middle of her cycle. Despite my busy week at work, on Thursday morning, just before lunch, I tried to call Isabella to invite her to lunch like we often did. There was no answer at home or on her cell phone. This was odd because Isabella, like most women, usually kept her phone close. I didn't leave a voicemail and called again, and this time, the alarm bells in my mind grew louder. Whatever was troubling Isabella needed to be addressed openly. I planned to take her away for the weekend, thinking that some quality time together might help us talk through whatever was troubling her. We needed a serious, heart-to-heart conversation about the state of our marriage. I even considered confessing my past mistake and renewing my commitment to our vows, assuming the timing was right. But then, Isabella dropped a bombshell. She knew about my affair with Stella and the hurt I had caused her. Instead of confronting me calmly, she retaliated by having her own affair to punish me for my unfaithfulness. That was why she had been so distant, making up excuses to avoid intimacy all week. As I sat in the van, my mind kept going back to this mess. It all started with my mistake, my moment of weakness with another woman. Isabella found out through an email from Stella but never confronted me directly. Instead, she chose revenge. She could have easily confronted me, and I would have confessed and promised never to cheat again. I could have explained how sick I felt when I got back from that work trip. When I came home from that week-long project at the resort, I was overwhelmed with guilt. I wanted to confess everything right then, but held back, thinking it would just cause her unnecessary pain. I hoped the incident would fade away, forgotten by both Stella and me. I believed there was no point in hurting Isabella over a one-time mistake, so I kept it from her, only to have it blow up in my face later. Now, our marriage is in shambles, and its future looks bleak. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Isabella went way too far with her revenge. My indiscretion wasn't meant to harm her intentionally. What she did was calculated and meant to cause maximum damage. It wasn't just about settling the score, it was about spite. She wanted to hurt me deeply. Maybe she even found a way to end our marriage and be with another man. She talked about how exciting it was to be with someone new and blamed me for her unfaithfulness. It was easy for her to put all the blame on me, saying it was my fault she cheated. I just couldn't accept her accusation fully. Sure, I'd been unfaithful, but the way she was retaliating was on a whole different level. My mind kept trying to find some justification for why she continued her affair even after she thought she had evened the score. Why didn't she just stop there? Why did she drag me into this mess and make me witness her betrayal? Just telling me about her infidelity would have been enough punishment. But no, she needed to utterly humiliate me and cut me to the core. My actions might have hurt our marriage, but her behavior over the past 5 days was far more destructive. I couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella's revenge had gone way too far. She took it to an extreme that was unnecessary. Even after her first encounter with him, there was still a chance for us to repair our relationship. But now, here I was, grabbing a pen and paper from the glove compartment, hastily writing a message. "Don't come home. We're through. Your ex-husband." The note screamed at me, making me question if I could actually go through with this. Could I really leave the woman I loved? Did she love me the same way? If she did, why was she being so spiteful? Why did she keep threatening that we might separate? Had she already decided our marriage was over and just wanted to humiliate me further? I walked back into the bar, handed the note and a $20 bill to the bartender, and said, "Give this to Isabella when she returns, okay?" The bartender gave me a knowing look, probably understanding the note's contents without reading it. He nodded, taking the note and money. "I'll give it to her as soon as she comes back," he said. I left the bar, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. My knees felt weak, my mouth went dry, and tears filled my eyes as I stumbled back to the van. I took a deep breath before driving away. Leaving meant ending my marriage, while staying could make my life even more miserable. The bar faded in my rearview mirror, and tears streamed down my face. The drive home felt like a nightmare. Part of me wanted to turn around and face whatever Isabella had planned, but my wounded pride silenced that thought. What's done is done. My mind was in chaos as I pulled into our driveway. Part of me clung to the past, to my wife and our life together, but the dominant part focused on what lay ahead. How would I protect myself? What about the divorce? The living arrangements? My instinct for organization kicked in. First, protect yourself physically, then legally. Secure the house and bank assets. Get a restraining order if necessary. I urgently needed to change the locks. I found a 24-hour locksmith in the phone book and called. I explained I needed all the locks changed immediately. The locksmith said it would cost an extra $100 for the late-night service, which I agreed to pay. He promised to arrive within an hour. Next, I had to prevent Isabella from coming back. She only had the clothes she was wearing, so I grabbed our two largest suitcases from the closet and packed her things. I loaded them into the van she usually drove, parked it at the curb, left the keys on the front seat, and took the garage door opener with me. The locksmith arrived quickly. He said it would take about an hour to change all 5 locks. I told him, "That's fine. Let me know if you need anything." While he worked, I checked my email. The messages from Stella were all there, including one Isabella sent pretending to be me, telling Stella to stay away. Stella hadn't responded, signaling the end of the affair. Staring at the emails, I wondered why Isabella hadn't confronted me directly about Stella. Why choose this path of revenge? Was there something deeper wrong with our marriage that she hadn't told me? Was this her way of settling everything in one grand act of vengeance? The phone rang and I knew it was Isabella. I let it go to voicemail. With the speaker on, I heard her trembling voice. "Oh, Leonardo, please pick up. We need to talk. Please don't end our marriage like this. Talk to me, Leonardo, please." She sounded like she was about to cry, but I didn't answer. The call ended. It seemed she wanted to reconcile now that I had acted first. She probably thought my guilt would make me let her walk all over me. She was wrong. I sat down at the computer, transferred all funds from our joint accounts to an account solely in my name, and reported our credit cards as stolen. When asked if I wanted new cards issued, I said I'd call back later. The locksmith finished changing the locks and handed me the new keys. That part was done. Isabella couldn't re-enter the house without my permission. While I was at the computer, the phone rang again. I had my word processor open, and it was another call from Isabella, her voice even more desperate, pleading for me to talk to her. I ignored it and started typing a 1-page message. "Isabella, do not ring the doorbell or knock. I will not answer. I've packed 2 suitcases with your clothes and belongings. They're in the van at the curb. Take the van and leave. Once you find a place to live, send me your address, and I'll send the rest of your things. You said tonight that we might go our separate ways several times. You were right. Now that you've chosen your path, you can walk it alone. I'll find my own path to walk. Goodbye, your ex-husband." I made a few revisions before printing it out and taping the notice to the front door. I knew Isabella might try to come back and confront me face to face, but that wasn't going to happen. I walked around the house, checking all the windows and doors to ensure they were securely locked. Then, I disconnected the front doorbell to avoid the annoying sound during the night. Feeling somewhat safer, I went to the den and poured myself a glass of Jack Patriciel's. As I settled into my lounge chair and took a long sip, my hands started trembling so much that I had to put the glass down. Suddenly, the emotional pain hit me like a tidal wave, and I began to cry uncontrollably. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, desperately trying to wake up, but knowing this was my harsh reality. That's when I remembered the envelope in my pocket and the wet underwear. I assumed the envelope contained a Dear John letter, but to my surprise, it held photographs. There was no letter, just about a dozen explicit pictures of Isabella. I flipped through them, realizing they were taken under the direction of her lover. She was willingly following his every command and submitting to his desires. This was her final act of humiliation against me. If I didn't end our marriage now, this humiliation would haunt me forever. My thoughts turned to the incriminating photos in her underwear as undeniable evidence of her infidelity. They could work in my favor if Isabella decided to get confrontational during the divorce proceedings. I placed the photos and underwear in a Ziploc bag and locked them in a safe. Then I returned to the computer and accessed the emails from Stella and Isabella. After careful consideration, I deleted each one. I composed an email to Stella explaining that the last email she received was from Isabella, not me. I detailed Isabella's vengeful actions and informed Stella I would initiate divorce proceedings against Isabella first thing Monday. I also expressed my admiration for Stella's companionship during our brief time together and suggested she get in touch if she ever came to town. Lastly, I asked Stella to deny any involvement if Isabella tried to use it against me and requested she reply to my work email. I sent the email and immediately deleted it. Stella had two choices: act as a friend and deny our involvement if questioned, or align with Isabella and potentially turn against me. I believed it was worth the risk to gauge Stella's reaction. With nothing more to do that night, I finished my Jack Patricials, took a shower, and went to bed. Suddenly, there was loud pounding on the front door. I knew it was Isabella without looking. Her voice followed, pleading for me to let her in and begging for a conversation. The banging continued for about 15 minutes before stopping. I stayed in bed with all the lights off, the house enveloped in eerie silence. Then, I heard a car engine start and drive away. I got up and looked out the window. The van was gone. I didn't know where she had gone, and frankly, I didn't care. Sleep eluded me as I lay in our marital bed, a place where Isabella and I had shared many passionate moments. Sunday morning arrived, and I felt even more exhausted than the night before. The stress and tension were taking a toll on my mind and body. Preparing breakfast for just myself seemed pointless, so I got dressed and decided to go to IHOP. When I opened the front door, I saw that Isabella had left a message on the notice I had taped to the door. It read, "Please, Leonardo, don't do this to us. Don't end our marriage this way. I still love you and want to remain your wife. We need to sit down and talk this through. Please call me on my cell phone. We need to talk. Please. Your loving wife, Isabella." For a brief moment, my defensive walls wavered as I read her note, but my wounded ego quickly reasserted itself, fortifying those defenses. A small voice inside me kept insisting there were too many unanswered questions, too much spitefulness, too much hatred to be brushed aside. I knew that voice was right. My emotions often swung wildly because of my deep love for my wife, but the unshakable truth was that she had gone far beyond just getting even. There was a side to Isabella I had never known. When I read her note again, I noticed there was no apology, no, "I'm sorry." She hadn't apologized in the 2 phone messages she left me either. Why not? If she truly wanted to patch things up, why wasn't she even pretending to be remorseful? Something must have happened in Isabella's life last week that made her ramp up her actions beyond her initial revenge affair. I racked my brain trying to figure it out, but nothing came to mind right away. I'd need to ponder these questions much longer and harder to come up with an answer. Breakfast was a welcome break. I was starving, and the food hit the spot. My mood lightened a bit as I scanned the morning paper. The news was as usual. The Middle East was in chaos, with no one able to broker peace. It was all about deep-seated hatred and endless cycles of retaliation. Suddenly it struck me, why didn't Isabella want to make peace between us first? Why did she feel the need to retaliate so brutally? Was her love for me so fragile that my one mistake deserved such utter humiliation? As I paid the bill, the young woman at the cash register smiled warmly and said, "Have a great day, sir." She handed me my change, and I wondered if this day would turn out great or not. Only time would tell. The drive home was smoother, my hunger was gone, and my thoughts were now on the upcoming events of the next week. What about the divorce? Should I start the process now, or wait a bit longer? As I turned onto my street, I saw Isabella's van parked in front of our house. This wasn't the right time for a face-to-face with her. I hadn't sorted out my feelings or found a way to justify all her actions. I quickly turned the car around and drove away. Unless she broke into the house, she'd have to wait in her van for me, just like she made me wait in that bar yesterday. She could sit there all day for all I cared. I headed to the health club and changed into my workout clothes. I needed a vigorous workout to clear my mind from the current mess, at least for a few hours. It would be a much-needed break. During my workout, I bumped into an old college buddy, Henry Kensington, who had recently gone through a divorce. Curious, I asked him about the process of filing for divorce and what pitfalls to avoid. Our conversation was very informative, ending with Henry giving me the contact information for his divorce attorney. Now I had a clear direction for my next steps. I planned to call the attorney the next day, Monday, and start the paperwork. This might prepare me better for the inevitable confrontation with Isabella. After the gym, I had a light lunch. When I got home in the evening, Isabella's van was gone. I sighed in relief as I pulled into the garage and closed the door. Inside, everything seemed in order. I found another note from Isabella, pleading with me to sit down and talk with her. Still, no apology or, "I'm sorry." I locked the door behind me. A warm shower, a couple of Excedrin PM, and I was off to bed. I needed rest, both physically and mentally, to prepare for the coming week. Sleep was deep and undisturbed, and I woke up feeling refreshed. After getting dressed and ready for work, I noticed the message light on the phone blinking. I must have forgotten to check it the night before. There were 2 messages from Isabella, both pleading for us to meet and talk, yet neither message had any hint of an apology or remorse. It dawned on me that she was withholding an apology to keep the guilt on my shoulders. It was heartbreaking to see our once happy marriage reduced to this blame game. At the office, I told the receptionist, Hannah, and my secretary, Victoria, that I wouldn't take any calls from Isabella and didn't want to see her if she showed up. They gave me odd looks, but I didn't explain. Let them gossip. Soon enough, the divorce would be public knowledge. Around 10 o'clock, I called the divorce attorney Henry recommended, and we set up a meeting for 2 o'clock that afternoon. The rest of the morning went by with my usual tasks, skipping lunch. At 1:30, I told Victoria I was leaving for the day and to call me on my cell in case of emergency. As I turned to leave, she mentioned Isabella had called 4 times that morning. I didn't comment and just headed for the elevator. The meeting with Charles Carrington, the divorce attorney, went smoothly. He started with his fees, then we got into the details. I handed over the photos and the stained underclothes Isabella had given me. I didn't explain how I got them, just that Isabella knew I had them. Charles seemed curious, but didn't push for more information. The evidence I provided, along with the brief account of Isabella meeting her lover, was enough for him to start the divorce process based on her adultery. I didn't mention my affair with Stella to Charles. My hope was that if Isabella brought it up, I could deny it more effectively. If Stella and I both denied it, it would be Isabella's word against ours. I still hoped Stella would side with me. Lastly, I asked Charles to file for a restraining order against Isabella to prevent her from contacting me. He agreed, promising all the paperwork would be ready by the next afternoon. Leaving Charles's office, I felt a renewed sense of control with all the necessary steps in motion. I decided to make a quick stop at the office to grab a couple of reports I needed for the next day. As I entered the driveway from the east side of the building, I saw Isabella's van pulling out from the north side of the parking lot. She merged into traffic and drove away without noticing me. Back at the office, Victoria was surprised to see me after I had said I was done for the day. I didn't offer any explanations, leaving her to wonder. As I packed the reports into my briefcase, Victoria handed me an envelope, saying Isabella had instructed her to deliver it to me. I slipped the envelope into my briefcase without opening it, certain that Victoria was curious about what was going on. She would have to remain in the dark for now. Before leaving the office, I decided to check my emails one last time. Among them was a message from Stella. I opened it and read, "Hello, Leonardo. I was really surprised to hear from you after that harsh email I got 2 weeks ago. It shocked and hurt me deeply. Now that I know it wasn't from you, I feel relieved. I'm sorry to hear about the trouble between you and your wife that seems to have started because of me. It's unfortunate that your wife is so vengeful. I know you will do what's best for you. As for our affair, it's a secret I will never tell anyone. You can trust me on that. If I'm ever in town, I'll call you and we can catch up. Good luck, your friend Stella." This was the denial I needed. With Stella's backing, I felt ready to counter any accusations Isabella might throw at me during the divorce proceedings. I quickly replied, thanking Stella for her support and expressing my hope to see her soon. After sending the response, I deleted both emails. In the parking lot, I retrieved the envelope Isabella had left for me from my briefcase. This letter was different from her previous notes and phone messages. It had a more defiant and threatening tone. No longer asking to talk, it read, "Leonardo, this is your last chance. I've tried to get you to call me and for us to talk this out over the past 2 days. You keep ignoring my calls and throwing me out of our house. You can either call me on my cell phone and arrange a meeting, or you will be served with divorce papers this week. There won't be another chance if you don't call me today. Your wife, Isabella." Instead of feeling upset or threatened, I found myself smiling. Isabella had shifted from pleading to issuing threats. She was trying to claim the moral high ground again, but her threat of divorce felt hollow since I had already signed the note at the bar as her ex-husband. My intentions should have been clear. Driving home, I considered my options. I could ignore the letter. The divorce process was already underway. Isabella was locked out of the house and I had the upper hand. Or I could arrange a meeting with her in a public place for a final face-to-face conversation. I could bring the divorce papers and serve them to her there. When I got home, Isabella's van wasn't in sight. This was a good sign. Inside, everything was as I left it, with no signs of forced entry. I wondered if Isabella had thought about getting a locksmith to let her in, but it seemed she hadn't. The message light on the phone was blinking. Isabella had left a concise message. "Leonardo, I left a note at your office today. I hope you've read it. If I don't get a call from you tonight, I'll have no choice but to see a divorce lawyer." Her message was brief and straightforward, yet again using what she thought was an empty threat. I decided that meeting her one last time to serve her with the divorce papers was the right move. However, I wanted to have dinner first and let her stew a bit longer. It was nearly 8 o'clock when I finally called her cell. The phone rang a few times before I heard her voice. "Hello, this is Isabella." "Hi, Isabella, it's Leonardo," I said. There was a pause before she responded. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "You got my message?" "I did," I replied, staying calm. "You've made it clear you want to sit down and talk. Is there really anything left for us to say?" "I want to hear you say in person that it's over," Isabella insisted. "No more notes, no more cold shoulders. We were passionate lovers once, Leonardo." "All right," I agreed. "Let's meet for dinner at Mario's tomorrow night at 6:30. Isabella agreed to the plan. As we ended the call, she said, "I still love you, Leonardo." Her declaration hung in the air. I briefly considered extending this sentiment, but common sense took over. It was time to end this once and for all. The final act of this tragic situation would unfold in less than 24 hours. I needed to mentally prepare for the conversation and plan what to say before handing her the divorce papers, with smooth jazz playing in the background as I sat in the den. I nursed my JD slowly, letting my thoughts solidify into a plan for the upcoming confrontation. After about 4 hours of pondering, I had a fairly solid script in mind. Surprisingly, sleep came easily and was restful. The next morning at work was hectic as usual. I made a quick call to Charles Carrington's office to check on the status of the divorce papers. They told me to come by after 4:30 and everything would be ready. I arrived at Charles's office just before 5 o'clock, and the receptionist informed me that Charles wanted to explain the papers and the procedure after serving them to Isabella. It took over 45 minutes for Charles to go over all the details. He informed me that the final divorce would take at least 3 months after both parties agreed, and the papers were filed with the court. I left Charles's office around 6 o'clock. The drive to Mario's would take about 15 minutes, so I would be on time for my 6:30 meeting with Isabella. As I entered the restaurant, the hostess greeted me with a warm smile. My ego wanted to believe she was impressed by me. I responded with a smile and asked if she had seated Isabella Montague. Her smile faded slightly as she motioned for me to follow her. My first sight of Isabella was as we approached the table. I greeted her with a simple, "Hello, Isabella," and took a seat across from her. "Hello, Leonardo. Don't I get a kiss tonight?" she asked, her smile turning into a pout. Recalling her words from our encounter at the bar, I replied, "That hasn't been decided yet." My response put Isabella on alert. She likely believed her charm would win me over, but now she had to rethink her strategy. The waitress came over and asked if we wanted drinks. Isabella ordered a white wine and I requested a double JD on the rocks. Isabella started the conversation once the waitress left, perhaps wanting to stay on the offensive. I want you to know, Leonardo, this isn't how I wanted our problems to end. You know what started all of this. I was just trying to restore balance so we could rebuild our marriage, she said calmly, without a trace of emotion. Her words were calculated, setting the stage for her next move. The waitress returned with our drinks, and we both took a deep sip. Isabella then fixed her gaze on me and continued, I hate being painted as the villain here. I acted out of hurt and frustration because of your affair with Stella. This mess is your fault. Her eyes were intense, trying to make me feel guilty while ignoring her own actions. The waitress came back to see if we were ready to order. I asked for some appetizers and another round of drinks. Isabella sat quietly, expecting an apology or response from me. None came. I kept my gaze steady as I finished my drink. So it's all my fault? You've done nothing wrong? I asked firmly, without any hint of apology. Yes, Leonardo, it's entirely your fault. You hid your affair from me, probably planning to keep seeing her. Isabella's tone grew sharper, like the sting of a viper. I wanted you to see that two can play the same game. How does it feel now? Our drinks and appetizers arrived, and I told the waitress not to disturb us for the next 15 to 20 minutes. She left with a cold shoulder. I needed uninterrupted time to deliver my message to Isabella. First of all, Isabella, this whole situation makes me sick. Yes, I had an affair with Stella at the resort. I won't deny it. My only defense is that I didn't start it. I would have told you everything, but now it's pointless. Isabella looked ready to speak, but I quickly interrupted. If you cut me off again, I'll leave you sitting here alone. My words and demeanor made it clear that it was my turn to talk. It's pointless now, because your response was extreme and vindictive. After you found out about Stella and me, you could have confronted me. I would have been repentant and ready to face your anger. But instead, you chose a spiteful revenge plot. During those 4 nights of your affair, you could have come to me with the truth, and we could have dealt with it together. But you didn't. Had you confronted me with the truth after I admitted my affair, I might have been the repentant husband you deserved. I might have even forgiven you for your own mistake, the one you felt compelled to match and exceed. You bragged about 13 times in 4 days when we met at the bar. Why 13? Why did you feel the need to outdo the number of times Stella and I were together? Isabella seemed about to respond, but I held up my hand to stop her. Not now, Isabella. You'll have your chance to speak. Let me finish without interruptions. My voice was firm and unyielding. As I was saying, it's not just the need to balance the scales that has blown this out of proportion. I could have understood tit for tat, but what I can't grasp is why you felt the need to go beyond parity. After the 7th time or the 4th day with your lover, when you drove us to the club on Saturday, you had more than payback in mind. You mentioned more than once that the outcome of that evening was uncertain and that we might just go our separate ways. Isabella sat there, her face emotionless, a perfect poker face. Her lack of reaction only fueled my resolve. The implied threat, that we might not leave together, that she might not even want to leave with me, had deeply wounded my self-esteem. I couldn't help but wonder how we had reached this point. My words were slow, deliberate, and clear. You had already admitted to going far beyond an eye for an eye. So what drove you to bring me to witness your infidelity? Why continue your affair right in front of me? Why humiliate me so thoroughly? Why the photographs? Why the damp underwear? Throughout our 4-year marriage, I never suspected such a dark side to your personality, a side that seemed to crave excessive revenge whenever threatened or wronged. You had always been loving and caring toward me, making this even harder to understand. While it may sound like an excuse, the reason I didn't disclose what happened between Stella and me at the resort was that I didn't want to hurt you further with my infidelity. I could see Isabella shifting uncomfortably in her seat, yet she remained silent, her eyes betraying nothing. The 5th day introduced something new, something that drove you to want to completely dismantle me. I still can't make sense of the 5th day. It was unnecessary to achieve the retribution you initially sought. You had already settled your score. You even told Patrick on the 1st day that the affair would last only 4 days, after which you would never see him again. So why did you feel compelled to take me to the club on Saturday and initiate a fifth day of extramarital activities with Patrick? I paused, giving Isabella a moment to respond, but she remained silent and motionless. All these questions overwhelmed me as you walked away from the table on Saturday. It made no sense to me then, and it still doesn't make sense to me now. If you're wondering why I left the club after you went off with your lover, it was because I couldn't find a rational explanation for why such profound humiliation was necessary. There seemed to be more to it than I could logically comprehend. All of a sudden, I realized that I didn't truly know you as well as I thought, and I could no longer predict your next actions. Isabella's poker face finally cracked, shifting to a look of vulnerability, as if she were a child about to explain why she disobeyed her parents. She licked her lips before speaking. I think I understand what you're trying to do here, Leonardo. You're trying to shift the blame for our marriage crisis onto me. I won't allow that. You broke your marriage vows first, opening the floodgates, and now you must face the consequences. Isabella, I'm not here to shift blame. All I'm seeking is an explanation for why the fifth day was so significant to you. Why did you feel the need to push your revenge to such an extent? That's all I'm asking. No blame. Just the reason why you believe the fifth day had to happen to satisfy your need for vindication. I softened my tone, hoping for a sincere response. Isabella pondered my words for a moment before speaking. After you confessed, I called my mother and told her everything. She said I was right to seek retribution, but insisted that mere retaliation wasn't enough. According to her, I needed to teach you a serious lesson. The realization hit me hard. It was her mother, Matilda, who was behind the fifth day. Matilda, Isabella's mother, had always been a thorn in my side. This revelation suddenly made everything clear. Matilda and I had a significant falling out about a year and a half ago. She was never welcome in my home. Her relentless criticism and negativity made her unbearable. Isabella and I moved 250 miles away from her after our marriage, but even that distance didn't seem enough. Despite everything, Isabella managed to let her mother's negative remarks roll off her back. About 2 years ago, Matilda's constant complaints became too much for Isabella's father, and he decided to leave her. Several months after their divorce, Matilda came to visit us. For the first day, I tolerated her ceaseless griping, but by the second day, I had reached my limit. I unleashed all my pent-up frustrations on her, making it clear that she was insufferable and that I never wanted her in my house again. My outburst distressed Isabella, but she stood by me. Matilda left the next day and never returned to our home. So the revenge of the fifth day wasn't Isabella's idea. It was her mother's influence, a misguided notion planted by Matilda. It was now glaringly obvious. I had never really considered Matilda's influence when trying to understand the events of the fifth day, but now it all made sense. As Isabella continued speaking, my focus shifted from Matilda to her words. Mother said all men are cheating, lying lowlives. None of you can be trusted. She reminded me how my father walked out on her and said you would probably do the same to me in a couple of years. Isabella paused, watching for my reaction. I could feel my expression change as I processed what she was saying. Isabella went on, explaining how her mother had advised her to go back the next day and engage with Patrick again. Matilda had a detailed plan for my public humiliation, crafted with meticulous care. Isabella also revealed that it was her mother who suggested showing me the photos Patrick had taken just before another encounter. When Isabella finished, she leaned back, clearly believing she had provided a complete explanation. It felt like another attempt to shift responsibility, blaming me initially and now her mother for everything. But Isabella wasn't a child. She was a grown woman, my wife, and she chose to follow through with these actions. She wasn't just a puppet. She had agency and willingly participated in deeply humiliating acts. Now that I knew the reason behind the fifth day, I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. She wanted to distance herself from blame, but I wasn't going to allow that. So it's all Matilda's fault for the fourth and fifth days? You didn't want to be involved at all, is that correct? I asked, pausing as Isabella nodded in agreement. So, you didn't genuinely want to continue with Patrick. It was all because your mother pushed you to punish me further. Is that accurate? Isabella nodded again emphatically. My frustration grew. Isabella was trying to dodge any responsibility, hiding behind her mother's influence. She seemed to think this absolved her of the pain she caused. My anger simmered as I remembered everything that had happened. Not once had Isabella shown remorse or offered an apology. She clung to her innocence and blamed everyone else for her actions. "I think you're lying, Isabella," I said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby diners. Her face reddened with embarrassment as she struggled to respond, but I continued before she could speak. "Remember, it was me you took to that bar on Saturday. It was me you humiliated publicly. It was me you taunted with those incriminating photos. Despite your attempts to blame others, I was there. I heard your words, meant to belittle and shame me. The tone of your voice suggesting you might not leave with me wasn't your mother's. It was yours. Your actions were calculated and vindictive. Maybe it started as your mother's idea, but when it came to executing the plan, it was all you. Your anger, your desire to rub my face in your infidelity were all on full display. That's why it's over between us. Your loving facade hid deep-seated resentment, likely inherited from your bitter mother. You're a hypocrite, Isabella. You wanted everything to happen just as it did. I'm sure if I had stayed and waited for you, you would have demanded the freedom to see Patrick whenever you wanted. You've shown no remorse, no regret. You may think you know me, but you're clueless. Now that I've experienced another man, Patrick won't be the only one sharing my bed." Her retort was filled with venom, but I was prepared. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the papers. Her eyes widened as she realized what they were. "I'm done listening to your excuses, Isabella. Here are the divorce papers. They give you the freedom to be with anyone you want. There's also a restraining order preventing you from contacting me in any way. If you try, I'll have you arrested. I'm finished with you." I stood up to leave. Isabella was speechless as I placed the papers in front of her. "One last thing. There's a pre-addressed envelope so you can inform me of your new address. This weekend, movers will come to pack your remaining belongings. They'll be kept in storage until you tell me where to send them." I left two $20 bills on the table, and as I turned to leave, Isabella shouted, "You damn bastard! I'll show you who walks out on whom." All eyes turned toward Isabella. I simply smiled and mouthed one word: salt. As I walked out, a thought came to me. I had read somewhere that to predict what your wife will be like in 25 years, observe her mother today. This brought a wry smile to my face. After all, I had only invested 4 years in this resentful woman. It was better to uncover her true nature now than later. Like mother, like daughter. The divorce proceeded relatively smoothly, with only one major hiccup. When the judge questioned Stella about our supposed affair, she denied it convincingly, just as she had promised. Isabella erupted in anger, nearly being held in contempt of court. I haven't seen Isabella since the day our divorce was finalized almost 3 years ago. I remain unmarried, enjoying the company of various women. Whenever a relationship seems to be getting serious, I suggest meeting their mothers. After a few dinner dates with both mother and daughter, I usually decide that staying single is the best choice. Wherever you are, Isabella, thank you for the valuable lesson.